Kanata was an unhinged psycho who had an overpowered ability, but still ended up getting isekaid. But instead of a rizzfull hero, he was an F-ranked ugly goblin. So he had to work harder and overcome various challenges while building a harem that will make you wish you were him. After Kanata went on a date with someone who turned out to be a bit off their rocker, things took a turn for the worse. Ending up with 38 stab wounds was already pretty grim, but then, to add insult to injury, he found himself reincarnated in the worst possible way. And this time, Truck-kun wasn't invited to the party. Waking up in his new life, Kanata was met with the sight of an ancient, ugly-ass goblin staring back at him. Totally baffled and struggling to wrap his head around the situation, Kanata realized he'd been reborn as one of them. To top it off, the elder goblin decided to slap him with a new name, Goblin, and then pulled a fast one by shoving a big, fat maggot down his throat for some bonus protein. As Goblin navigated his new life as a baby goblin, he found himself in a bit of a pickle. That also was his color. Unable to utter a word or reject anything thrown his way, he was at the mercy of his surroundings. On the second day, he opened his eyes to a horde of similarly unappealing green infants. It was then that the harsh truth hit him like a ton of bricks. He was just as hideous as the rest of them. Slowly but surely, he came to terms with the fact that his previous life was gone like an accidentally deleted save game file, and he was now a feeble, helpless baby. Throughout the day, tears streamed down his tiny goblin cheeks as he mourned the loss of his once dashing human appearance. By the third day, he noticed something peculiar. Goblins seemed to mature at a lightning-fast pace compared to humans. Yet, despite this rapid growth, he couldn't shake the fact that he was still as bald as a baby's bottom. Despite his rather unfortunate circumstances, Goblin found a glimmer of hope in the fact that he could finally move and communicate again. It wasn't exactly the dream scenario, but he made up his mind to roll with the punches and embrace his new life to the fullest. So, with newfound determination, he set out to tackle the challenges that lay ahead. Come the fourth day, the goblins, now mostly grown, gathered once more around the elder. Their reunion took an unexpected turn when the elder presented them with a platter of maggots, declaring that he was done playing caretaker to a bunch of freeloaders. From now on, they were on their own when it came to finding grub. Goblin hesitated for a moment at the thought of chowing down on maggots voluntarily, but he reasoned that it was packed with pure protein, so he dug in anyway as he couldn't order Taco Bell this time. Now out on his own, Goblin stepped out of the cave into a world bursting with unfamiliar flora and fauna. Another goblin named 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍 trailed behind him, obviously nervous about his first venture into the great outdoors. Offering some reassurance, Goblin admitted that it was his first time laying eyes on this place too. Despite 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍 not being the sharpest tool in the shed, he was eager to explore. Goblin decided to team up with him for a simple reason. 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍 was the muscle man, which made him a valuable asset when it came to grub hunting. As they roamed through the forest, they stumbled upon a rabbit. Goblin directed 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍 to approach it head-on. The rabbit bolted, but it was all part of the plan. Positioned in a nearby tree, Goblin waited patiently until the rabbit ventured close enough. With lightning speed, he swooped down from his perch and swiftly bonked the bunny doge style with a well-aimed blow from a stick. Turns out, this hunting tactic was a winner. However, once they caught the bunny, 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍's eyes turned 50 shades of greedy for Goblin's liking. Quick to assert his dominance without T-posing, Goblin reminded him who was the chattiest boss in town. After 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍 lived and died by the bonk, Goblin got down to business, prepping the bunny for their dinner. He deftly removed the rabbit's horn, seeing its potential as a makeshift weapon. Just as he was lost in thought, a strange notification popped into his head, leaving him scratching his noggin in confusion. The elder never mentioned anything like this before. Before he could dwell on it, 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍 snapped out of his slumber, eagerly awaiting his share of the spoils. Goblin dished out the meat, and 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍 wasted no time in tucking in, grateful for the meal. On the fifth day, they continued their hunting expedition, and Goblin put the rabbit horn to good use once again, snagging himself a fresh one in the process. As he held the horn, another cryptic message pinged in his mind, leaving him scratching his noggin in confusion part 2. As he settled down to enjoy a well-deserved meal of meat, a sudden surge of excitement washed over him as his eyes shimmered in a vibrant shade of blue. It dawned on him he had somehow acquired an escape skill from the rabbit. In that moment, everything clicked into place as memories of his past life flooded back. He recalled his unique power of absorption, which allowed him to potentially inherit the skills of whatever he devoured. While he still retained this absorption ability, it seemed that all other acquired skills had been wiped clean with his new goblin form. Gobro realized just how fortunate he was to possess a skill, especially with all sorts of dangerous beasts lurking in the forest. It looked like his luck wasn't all bad after all. Things were shaping up nicely for Gobro as the 6th day rolled around. He found himself turning heads with his impressive hunting skills, even catching the eye of a certain chick who was thoroughly impressed by their catch of horn rabbits, a high score that the other NPCs couldn't attain even with cheat codes. What's more, the fact that this chick actually had hair confirmed a hopeful suspicion that goblins could indeed grow hair, unlike poor Gobru and 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿, who were as bald as Saitama. Feeling a spark of camaraderie, Gobru invited her to join their hunt the following day, to which she eagerly agreed. Unfortunately, Mother Nature had other plans for them on the 7th day, literally raining on their parade with heavy rain that put a damper on their outdoor activities. With their plans literally washed away, Gobro found himself with some unexpected free time. Figuring he might as well make the most of it, he decided to explore the storage area, a place he'd never ventured into before. Little did he know, he was about to stumble upon a shocking discovery, a group of imprisoned human women, confirming Goblin Slayer's long-standing belief about the world. Determined to shake off the unsettling sight of the imprisoned chicks, Gobru shifted his focus to a more constructive task, crafting a new weapon. Just as he was getting into the groove, he was approached by none other than the Goblin Elder, 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿, who seemed intrigued by Gobro's unusual determination to survive and not be an ugly bald loser who wants to die. Gobru couldn't help but wonder if this might accelerate his leveling up process. To his surprise, Gobru was completely oblivious to the existence of a level system in this world. It was then that 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 instructed him to tap his forehead, revealing the level indicator. Gobru's jaw practically hit the floor when he saw that the Elder was already sitting pretty at level 86. 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 dropped a bombshell. Reaching level 100 would unlock the potential for one to evolve into a higher being. However, there was a catch. Goblins aged at an accelerated rate, and despite only being in his 20s, Gobru looked considerably older. As 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 bid him farewell, Gobru made a promise to himself that he would stick around to witness the transformation of an evolved hobgoblin when the promising youngsters returned from their village. Yet something didn't feel right to Gobru. The following day the weather was clear, so Gobru decided to go hunting with the other two, impressed by their exceptional teamwork, especially considering they had only been together for a few weeks with 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿's support. In their hunting formation, Gobru took on the role of the middle-range attacker, while 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 led the charge up front. With this strategy, they managed to secure a hefty haul of meat. 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 couldn't help but shed tears of joy as she savored the thick, juicy meat. Taking a bite himself, Gobru was surprised to discover that snake meat bestowed upon him several new skills. Encouraged by this, they continued their expedition the following day. However, their luck took a turn for the worse on the 11th day when they made the mistake of venturing into an unknown cave. Unfortunately for them, they found themselves face to face with a massive swarm of vampire bats. They attempted to flee while panicking, but the bats were too fast for them. 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 and Gobru made the split-second decision to stand on business and confront the bats head-on. Initially overwhelmed, Gobru tapped into the evil eye skill he had acquired, freezing the bats in place. With the creatures immobilized, they swiftly killed them all. Afterward, with them hungry enough to eat a cow, they resorted to consuming the corpses of the bats, a grim reminder of the harsh realities of survival. After indulging in a feast fit for kings, Gobru found himself blessed with new abilities thanks to the consumption of bat meat. No, he did not get coronavirus, but he did get echolation, vamp up, and vamphilia. Meanwhile, the other goblins, the stupid ones with nothing right in their left brains and nothing left in the right, watched in envy. That evening their frustrations boiled over, and they attempted to lay blame on Gobru for their own hunting failures. If only they put in the same effort, they wouldn't be going hungry, Gobru thought. However, they sorely underestimated him, as he could sense their approach. When they tried to attack him, Gobru fought back, unintentionally causing the death of one of the goblins due to a misstep in his venom skill usage. Despite him basically committing murder, which is a federal crime, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 remained unfazed, determined to teach them a lesson for their treachery. However, when 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 intervened, retaliating fiercely for their attack on her cherished 𝐒𝐒𝐓, he couldn't help but feel a bit of pity for them. The next day they embarked on another hunting expedition, this time with a plan to ambush an unsuspecting orc. As the creature went about its business, they decided to stand on business. They cunningly struck it in the eye with a well-aimed rock, temporarily blinding it. Seizing the moment, 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 charged forward, only to be knocked back by the orc's retaliatory strike with its pickaxe. As the orc believed it had the upper hand, its fingers had other plans as it got smashed from the impact of another precisely aimed rock. Unfazed, they pressed on, strategically targeting the orc's kneecaps with a strong blow to render them useless. Finally, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 delivered the decisive blows, repeatedly stabbing the orc in the head just like he learned from his former date. With their target acquired, they reveled in their triumph and savored the sweet spoils of their victory. Seeing that they had way too much meat, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 made a calculated decision to transport it all back to their cave, his mind going into big brain mode. Once they had gathered the excess meat, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 summoned the attention of the broke and famished goblins. With generous intent, he announced that they were free to feast on as much meat as they desired. After some initial hesitation, the goblins one by one dropped to their knees, eagerly devouring 𝐒𝐒𝐓's huge meat. As he watched them, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 couldn't help but reflect on how different his actions were from those of his previous life. Perhaps being reincarnated had changed more than just his physical form. Later that night, as everyone drifted off into slumber, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 attempted to do the same. However, a persistent notification in his mind refused to let him rest. But due to exhaustion from the day's events, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 paid no mind to the persistent notification buzzing in his mind, informing him of his level up into a hobgoblin, an even chadder version of the goblins. The following morning, however, he was woken up by a peculiar sensation. As he glanced at his reflection, his mind was filled with confusion. Overnight, he had undergone a remarkable transformation, reverting to his former Chad appearance before reincarnation, complete with a full head of hair, unlike Saitama. Even more astounding, 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 and 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 appeared to have undergone the same metamorphosis, though 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 seemed rather pleased with the change in her friend's appearance. The elder, drawn by the commotion, arrived to investigate and was wowed to discover that both 𝐒𝐒𝐓 and 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 had evolved despite their mere 2 weeks of existence. Seizing the moment, 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 proposed a test to gauge their newfound strength. However, he wasn't content with a simple hunt. He suggested a sparring match with the Chad boss himself, 𝐒𝐒𝐓. Eager for the challenge, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 agreed, and they went into the forest to throw down. The two goblins engaged in a fierce boxing match, with 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 displaying noticeable improvement in strength. However, his lack of combat finesse and outright awesomeness proved to be his downfall, as 𝐒𝐒𝐓 effortlessly dodged a punch and swept his legs out from under him. Acknowledging defeat, 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 praised 𝐒𝐒𝐓 for his formidable strength and his awesomeness, yet 𝐒𝐒𝐓 wasn't one to downplay his opponent's abilities. He recognized 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿's raw power, declaring him stronger than anyone else present. Suddenly, they heard the howls of wolves, which meant one thing: food. But we're not sure which one would be that. Acting swiftly, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 summoned 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 from her hiding spot and instructed her to retrieve the crossbow they had prepared earlier. A throwdown would happen soon, and they would need it. As the wolves descended upon a group of rabbits, successfully capturing their prey, their predatory gaze shifted to an unsuspecting orc. Despite the orc's attempts to flee, the wolves were relentless. They pursued the orc tirelessly like that officer from Subway Surfers. In a swift and brutal attack, they tore the orc to shreds. Witnessing National Geographic live in HD, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 and 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 recognized an opportunity to test their newfound strength against the wolves. Signaling to 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿, they asked her to unleash the crossbow upon the pack. As the leader wolf fell to her precise aim, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 and 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 seized the moment, joining forces to take down the remaining members of the pack. With their leader eliminated, the wolves' coordinated attacks failed a lot, and they were swiftly stomped upon one by one. Only the alpha wolf remained standing, the Chad of all wolves. but it too succumbed to the combined might of Goblin and 𝐒𝐔𝐁𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿. Approaching the fallen beast, Goblin took a bite, acquiring new skills including a coveted leadership ability. Returning to the cave with the carcasses of the defeated wolves, Goblin declared to the other goblins that they were now free to feast on the meat. However, he made it clear that they were expected to begin hunting for themselves from that point forward. Despite their initial reluctance, the goblins humbled themselves before Goblin, asking for his guidance in honing their hunting skills. Seeing their earnest desire to learn, Goblin agreed to train them in the art of hunting and even offered to teach them how to make weapons if needed. This act of generosity earned him the admiration and support of his comrades, solidifying his position as their head hobgoblin. While Goblin acknowledged the role his leadership skills played, he remained steadfast in his commitment to guiding and empowering his fellow goblins. Determined to lead by example, Goblin pledged to work tirelessly, continuously increasing his skills and steadfastly pursuing their collective goals. With unwavering determination straight from Undertale, he embarked on the journey ahead, ready to face whatever challenges lay in their path. Day 17, Goblin woke 𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 up to a horrible sight. All the human women who'd been held prisoner sadly took their own lives. Goblin quietly held a memorial for them with 𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿. Jump ahead to day 26, and Goblin was knee-deep in training the other goblins. In the meantime, he'd been chowing down on any tough opponent he faced, picking up new skills as he went, and no, he's not Rimuru Tempest. Suddenly, another bunch of goblins started heading their way, and no, they didn't look like they were bringing flower baskets. Goblin was ready to throw down and protect everyone, but 𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 stepped in and informed him that they were their own raiders. Goblin was shocked to find out that they were also the fathers of his generation of goblins. The raiders had kidnapped another bunch of human chicks, and those sinister goblins were grinning like Cheshire cats, because their last catch ended in tragedy. It seemed that goblin DNA packed quite a punch, as even when mixed with other species, it still churned out goblin offspring. Goblin got the whole urge to reproduce things, but he wasn't feeling too hot about the current setup. He insisted on taking care of the human women himself, which really ticked off the raiders because they can't just let him start a harem out of the blue. Goblin's goblin buddies were all set to back him up, sparking some serious tension between the two groups. Out of nowhere, two goblin gals named 𝐻𝐈𝐍𝐿 and 𝐻𝐈𝐍𝐿 swooped in to urge both sides to chill and avoid a full-blown civil war. These crafty little critters came up with a plan. The leaders of both generations would duke it out, and whoever won would call the shots for the village's future. The raider was dead set on teaching Goblin a lesson, and Goblin was game for the challenge. Armed with some mysterious string, Goblin swiftly clinched the victory Spider-Man style, leaving everyone scratching their heads. He spilled the beans that the string was a natural talent of his. He mulled over the fact that he'd acquired his ability to produce spider silk after munching on a demon spider. The girls were floored to learn that someone like him had popped up while they were away, and Goblin proudly claimed his spot as the new village leader. He threw it out there if anyone had a bone to pick with his new gig, but no one dared to step up. Goblin then let the humans know that he'd told everyone to keep their hands off them. He promised he wouldn't hurt them either, and pledged to figure out a way to send them back to a human village. The girls wondered if they'd have to pitch in somehow, and it came out that Goblin's motives weren't entirely selfless as you'd obviously think. He was after the knowledge the humans had. Goblin fired off some questions and found out these girls were part of a traveling crew when the goblins attacked. All the guys bit the dust, and only these 5 made it out alive. On day 28, Goblin was surprised to catch one of the girls with a smile on her face. He clocked that they weren't over it entirely, but were just trying to stay upbeat to make things easier. Goblin decided to be their backbone, hoping it would help. 2 of the girls were sisters who also happened to be cooks and tailors. The one in glasses was an alchemist, the scatterbrain was a combo appraiser and smith, and the redhead was fresh to the warrior gig. Goblin planned to get her in on their training down the line. He drilled everyone hard, pushing them to their limits, even throwing some insults when they flagged. In the days that followed, he focused on group drills instead of hunting, and made sure everyone knew the new rules he'd laid down. On the rainy 31st day, Goblin and 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 locked horns in a spar that left everyone amazed. Later that night, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 sniffed out a group of goblins scheming to buck his rules about his harem by proxy. Quick as a whip, he sliced through one and rounded up the rest, giving them a reminder who the Chad boss there was. When one of them got mouthy, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 put him in his place. Feeling bad, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 apologized to the women, comforting the redhead as she let it out in his arms. Just then, the other goblins rolled up, and 𝐒𝐒𝐓 sent 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 to usher the captured ones out. Plus, he had 𝐒𝐒𝐓 gather the rest to witness what he was about to do. Outside, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 used those captured goblins as a lesson, sending a message loud and clear. He made sure everyone understood the village rules by coming down hard on them, making an example. After driving the point home, he let them go. Even though Hopkin caught the worst of it and sadly kicked the bucket the next day, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 drew the line at taking lives. On day 32, 𝐒𝐒𝐓's crew showed off their teamwork by taking down a tree-horn horse. Despite the challenge, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 picked up some new tricks, like Tri-Burst, which let him land 3 hits in one swing. That night, the redhead sought solace in 𝐒𝐒𝐓's bed, clearly still shocked from the night before. 𝐒𝐒𝐓 comforted her and let her stay the night. But when morning came, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 found out 𝐒𝐒𝐓 had also tagged along with their crew, and that his harem was growing even more. On the same day, they realized that Gabi, a female goblin, had evolved into a hobgoblin too. Things were rolling along pretty smoothly. 𝐒𝐒𝐓 took charge of the ranged crew, while 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 led the fighters. Hobsato handled the mobile squad, and Gabi took up the rear support role, handling odds and ends. Hobza, meanwhile, was the head honcho of the mage squad, even though she was the only mage in town for now. For the rest of the day, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 handed off training duties to Hobza so he could head deep into the forest for some hunting. During this period, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 got curious about some dark magic and was blown away by its power. A normal Saturday afternoon for a goblin. With one shot, he effortlessly wiped out a tough tree lawn, literally turning it into firewood. But then it hit him, not the firewood of course, but the thought that maybe the magic had made him a bit too cocky as he ventured into the northern woods. There he stumbled upon a creepy spot soaked in blood, triggering a memory of 𝐒𝐒𝐓's warning to steer clear of the northern forest at all costs, thanks to a scary beast known as the Red Bear. Now your average Joe would have bolted long before, but not the Chad Goblin. Face to face with the monster, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 watched in awe as it shredded through a tree horn like it was nothing. As the Red Bear got closer, there was no turning back for 𝐒𝐒𝐓, not when he's staring down the barrel of a one-armed fire-breathing behemoth. But 𝐒𝐒𝐓's no average Joe. He's all about tackling challenges head-on and uncovering what he's made of. So he decided to pull out all the stops, starting with phase 1 of the dark magic. Meanwhile, back in the village, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 was getting antsy because 𝐒𝐒𝐓's been MIA for a while. Worry started spreading among the villagers when they realized no one had seen him around either. As 𝐒𝐒𝐓 faced down the Red Bear, he was caught off guard when the bear sacrificed its own arm to counter his dark spell. The bear went on the offensive, and 𝐒𝐒𝐓 realized that his fancy tree lawn armor might not be as bulletproof as he thought. With no other choice, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 went on the attack, aiming for the bear's noggin, but his weapon bounced off the bear's skull like a pebble on a windshield, and he got launched by the beast's powerful counter. 𝐒𝐒𝐓 tried to get back in control, but the bear busted loose and hit him with a fiery breath attack. At that moment, he knew he effed up. The forest was ablaze, and 𝐒𝐒𝐓's feeling the heat, literally. The fire-breathing bear had caught him off guard, but despite the danger, he knew he had to take some hits to come out on top. As he went in for another strike, he shielded himself from the flames. The bear was tough, but 𝐒𝐒𝐓 flipped the script by using the fire against it, jabbing it right in the mouth. He was chuffed with his plan, but then the bear struck back, forcing him to reel it in. Even though he gave it his all, 𝐒𝐒𝐓 took some serious hits from the bear's onslaught. He knew this round was a draw, but at least with his blade stuck in the bear's mouth, it couldn't spit fire anymore. It could only spit like a llama now. Still, the bear was standing tall, posing a serious threat to 𝐒𝐒𝐓's life with just one more swipe. He was in a tight spot, but 𝐒𝐒𝐓 wasn't giving up. He dived back into the fray, dealing some damage to his opponent, but he wasn't satisfied. He boldly declared he was going to devour the bear, because after all, when life throws you a fire-breathing bear, you grab a sword and make barbecue. But his bold move came with a hefty price. He lost an arm. After a brutal brawl, Goblin came out on top on day 34, though barely holding it together. As he chowed down on the bear, he scored a bunch of new skills like Minecraft experience points, like boosted damage and strength. It was all a bit much, and he passed out, only to wake up as a rare ogre breed, exceeding all expectations. Even with his consciousness fading, Gobru's gut told him to evolve. On day 35, he kept on munching on the bear, snagging even more powerful traits. He reached out for his knife, which now looked way smaller than it used to, and then it hit him. Goblin had transformed into an ogre. When he headed back to the village, everyone freaked out, thinking they were under attack. They were ready to bolt, puzzled by why the ogre was grinning at them, and they were desperate for Goblin to come save the day. Lucky for them, Gabby recognized him, but instead of being wowed by his transformation, she was livid about his disappearing act. In her rage, she ended up hurting herself, but her anger at Goblin didn't budge. She was bummed about his lost arm, but the others were blown away by his triumph over the red bear. Gabby was especially flawed, pointing out that Goblin had managed to take down the bigwig of the Northern Woods just 1 month after being born. One had a ton of questions, but Goblin was just grateful he had made it through and found his groove in this new world. Later on, everyone was still gawking at Gobru's epic transformation. He had grown heaps bigger and stronger, like the Incredible Hulk. Goblin figured he'd go check on the human women, his harem I mean, but to his surprise, Goblin and the redhead were trailing right behind him for who knows what reason. As expected, the humans flipped out at the sight of him, but he managed to calm them down by assuring them it was still him. But Goblin seemed peeved about something and gave his leg a pinch. Turns out, she was bummed he accidentally wrecked the X she made for him, but she had whipped up a new knife using some fancy spirit stone. Goblin gave her props for her handiwork, but then the other girls started pinching him even harder because the more the merrier. The twins needed a hand with their cooking duties, so Goblin said he'd assign a few goblins to help out. He was impressed how quickly they'd adapted to hanging around goblins, so he told them they'd make top-notch partners. He joked if they'd like to be his wives, and they fired back, calling him a smooth operator. Goblin was loving their smiles, but once again the redhead and Goblin seemed more ticked off. Then he found out the alchemist had whipped up some poison originally for self-defense. But now that she had a goblin pal she could trust like Goblin, she didn't need it anymore. Goblin lifted her up and admired her grin too, creating quite some chemistry, but he could sense the bad vibes coming from the other girls. He had been pouring his energy into lifting their spirits, but now he was feeling drained. On day 36, Goblin realized he couldn't train alongside the others anymore. His power had gotten so intense that even his lightest taps put regular goblins on death's door. Even 𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐻 armor couldn't handle it. While Goblin was patching up a nearly dead goblin, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was up with 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐻. Even though 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐻 brushed it off and headed out to hunt, Goblin could tell something was off. Plus, he noticed Hansato and Goblin teaming up for hunts, while the redhead was off doing her own thing, and Goblin was still mining for spirit stones. As for Goblin himself, he was amazed he could still use his missing arm like a slime, all thanks to munching on one before. No, it wasn't Rimuru Tempest. He was worried about 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐻, but 𝐒𝐒𝐍𝐻 said it was all up to 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐻's hustle. They got into it while Goblin wished 𝐒𝐒𝐍𝐻 would give back his book. Meanwhile, Goblin was just happy to finally have a chill day. But on the 37th day, Goblin flipped out after finding a little critter in rough shape. He did his best to nurse it back, but it was bleeding out fast. So, he decided to get some blood regenerating medicine from the alchemist. Luckily it did the trick, and they introduced themselves to the little critter they dubbed a carbuncle. Turns out, the carbuncle was a returner, and she revealed to them that she got targeted by humans. The gem on her noggin was some fancy stuff, worth a whopping billion gold. She humbly asked the crew to lend her a hand, and begged them to take out the humans who went after her. Goblin, knowing a thing or two about carbuncles, revealed that their master, a big shot magician named Velvet, made him guard his secret stash. The returner added that she got banged up in the attack, which shortened her lifespan. Inside the treasure spot, there was some top-tier gear Velvet collected over the years. She also let on that her master couldn't stand humans and would rather see goblins nab the loot than adventurer types. Gobru boldly declared they were all set to roll. The blacksmith girl handed him his fresh dagger, calming down the scared human ladies by assuring them he wouldn't lay a finger on them. His plan was to get the humans to scram peacefully, but he warned they might have to get tough if they didn't play ball. After navigating through the whole maze they cooked up, they landed in the treasure room. Gobru realized that they needed to convince the humans to split, so he told the gang to lay low. He spotted the adventurers sniffing around for treasure, but they mistook him for some other monster to bash. They jumped into action, but their jaws hit the floor when Gobru spotted their sneaky invisible buddy. Gobru schooled them, saying they were trespassing and their gig amounted to straight-up theft and murder. But it was clear these guys had zero remorse, leading Gobru to figure they were a lost cause. The clueless humans were shocked that an ogre could speak their language like a boss, but Gobru reassured them he had a soft spot too. Even after he pleaded with them, they were dead set on ignoring him and kept swinging. But Gobru danced around their attacks like it was nothing and gave them one more chance to skedaddle. Gobru noticed that the humans in the backline were leaning hard on some top-tier magic gear and gave the situation a once-over. But he saw right through their fighting style. It was as weak as Yamcha if put in the Tournament of Power, and they were banking way too much on those fancy level boosters to up their game. For Gobru, it was child's play to take them down. Then out of nowhere, one mage started cheering, thinking he'd put Gobru on ice. But to their horror, it was crystal clear that his attack just got Gobru heated up. Up till now, Gobru had been giving them a pass, but he'd hit his limit. The humans were shaking in their boots as they realized their level 3 magic spell did zilch. Gobru laid it down straight. He was done being Mr. Nice Goblin. He signaled for the crew to get in on the action, and they wasted no time diving in. With his blade drawn, Gobru gave the humans a heads up about blowing their chance to walk away. Later on, he told them that they sorted out the adventurers and polished them off, picking up some sweet new skills like Assassin, High Wizard and Enchanter. Plus, they snagged some top-shelf loot from the high-level adventurers among the bunch. Digging through the loot, Gobru found a rare ring tucked away in an item bag, so he decided to gobble it up. This nifty move let him summon a box that could hold a boatload of goodies. Together, they hoofed it to the treasure room, where Returner gave her thanks. She spilled that her master, Velvet, had some serious mojo with spirits, which explained why there was a boatload of spirit stones in the area. Before vanishing, Returner wished Gobru good health, and Gobru munched down the gem left behind by Returner. 𝐒𝐔𝐁𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 checked in on his friend, who assured her he was good. They took a beat to pay respects to Returner before Gobru decided to divvy up the loot among the crew. Even after stashing all the treasure, Gobru was blown away by how much his item box could handle. Not wanting to leave Velvet's body behind, Gobru decided to give him a proper send-off by cremating him, uncovering a mysterious gauntlet in the process. When he slipped it on, it melded with him, becoming his new arm. The gang's jaws hit the floor as Gobru showed off what the gauntlet could do. It was like it had always been a part of him. After they hit the road, Gobru decided to throw a party to celebrate their successful mission. On the 38th day, he and the blacksmith took stock of all the loot they scored, finding out each item's rare and powerful. By day 39, Gobru dished out magical gear to the 10 hobgoblins in their crew, while he picked out a vermilion spear for himself. With that choice and 2 other items in his arsenal, Gobru now boasted 3 legendary artifacts. Legendary gear was second only to Phantasm-class stuff in rarity, and rumor had it just one piece could rule entire nations. Later on, they hit the road to whip up some bear soup ingredients, and Gobru was stoked to see everyone in the crew getting stronger. On day 40, Gobru made a big call to step down and hand the leadership reins to someone else among the hobgoblins, taking himself out of the running. Plus, he put together a mercenary crew. The next day, he set off on a quest to tango with some new and wild monsters. His first find was a golden spider, dropping some intriguing loot that seemed valuable. Munching on these goodies gave him the power to whip up golden string, perfect for crafting accessories. Next up, he bumped into a gang of red deer, but chowing down on just one didn't unlock any new tricks. As he kept on trekking, Gobru stumbled upon a majestic tree and learned about a species called dryads. According to 𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿, these seductive beings lured in males from other species and, well, used them as snacks. Dryads were all female, and their beauty was so irresistible that men couldn't help but fall for them. Gobru was dishing this out because a dryad had suddenly popped up in front of him. She was impressed by Gobru's beefy muscles and just wanted to chat. Gobru was finding it tough to resist her charm, but he knew he had to keep his guard up or end up on her menu. So, he tapped into a new ability called libido, the perfect name for this power, planning to chow down on the dryad in 5 hours. After a taste, Gobru scored a nifty trait called Dryad's Blessing. Even though the dryad was still kicking, she told Gobru to swing by again soon, to which he casually responded he'd think about it. Later, Gobru took a dip in the lake only to find himself surrounded by lizard men. He was feeling unbeatable that day, so he made quick work of them and even took out another beastie. On the 42nd day, he found 2 goblins with a knack for magic, who hopped on board with 𝐒𝐿𝐍𝐿's squad in a jiffy. But her slick grin set off alarm bells for Gobru. Then he learned how to enchant his weapon, which seemed to ruffle the blacksmith girl's feathers. On day 43, 𝐒𝐿𝐍𝐿 was steamed at her son, but nobody clued him in on why, just telling him to think it over. The redhead was just as riled up, and the twin cooks looked frazzled as they tried to dish up some poisoned chow. Gobru was floored when the usually sharp alchemist missed the tension among the girls. She revealed that they were all jelly because he went on a date and they spotted kiss marks on his neck. Gobru was clueless about the whole deal and blamed a dryad, thinking it was all a setup. As he tried to wrap his head around it, the alchemist threw him for a loop by confessing she felt the same way and planted one on him. She was hoping he'd feel the same, but Gobru never saw this coming. He was mulling over how her move made him feel when 𝐒𝐿𝐍𝐿 barged in, fuming. She demanded the same treatment and all the human girls chimed in. Outside, Gobru explained he'd shut himself in to focus on some work, earning even more props from the crew. Thanks for tuning in to this epic adventure with Gobru. If you enjoyed following along with his journey, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fantastical tales. And remember, the adventure doesn't end here. There's always more excitement waiting just around the corner. Until next time, happy exploring!